The rising conflict of 2026. The war between USA and Venezuela. They said it would never happen. They were wrong. There's a war coming. Not the kind you see on the evening news with tanks rolling through city streets in broad daylight. No. This is the war that moves in shadows. The conflict that kills slowly, strangling nations in the dark while the world sleeps. A war without a single shot fired across borders, yet deadlier than most battles in history. Tonight, we're descending into one of the most dangerous geopolitical powder kegs of our time. The United States versus Venezuela. Two nations locked in a dance of economic destruction, political warfare, and the very real threat of something far worse. And in 2026, as you're watching this, the darkness is closing in. This isn't ancient history. This is happening now. Right now. And what unfolds in the coming months could reshape the entire Western Hemisphere. Welcome to Past X Proof, where we uncover the stories that hide in the shadows of history. Tonight, we're entering a conflict zone where the night never ends, where millions flee under cover of darkness, and where two nations are playing a game that could set the world on fire. The question isn't whether war will come. The question is, what kind of war and how many will die before the sun rises again? December 14, 1922, middle of the night. Lake Maracaibo, Venezuela. The earth tears open. Oil erupts 100 feet into the air, black blood shooting into the darkness for 9 days straight. Workers run, screaming, convinced they've opened the gates of hell itself. In a way, they had. Venezuela had just discovered it was sitting on more oil than Saudi Arabia. More than anyone on Earth. 297 billion barrels of black gold hidden beneath the soil. And with that discovery came something else, a curse that would destroy everything it touched. American companies swarmed like vultures. Standard Oil, Gulf Oil, Shell, they came in the night, cutting deals with corrupt officials, extracting Venezuela's wealth while ordinary people starved. For decades, the oil flowed north while poverty flowed south. But curses have a way of demanding payment. And Venezuela's payment was coming due. By the 1980s, corruption had rotted the country from the inside. The oil money that should have built schools and hospitals disappeared into offshore accounts. Banks collapsed. Riots erupted. In February 1989, hundreds were killed in the Caracazo, a spontaneous explosion of rage in the streets of Caracas. Bodies in the darkness, blood on the pavement. The smell of tear gas choking the night air. Something was stirring in that darkness, something that would change everything. February 4th, 1992, 2 a.m., Caracas sleeps. Venezuelan Army Lieutenant Colonel Hugo Chavez leads a group of rebel soldiers through the dark streets. They move like ghosts, taking over military bases, seizing TV stations, hunting for the president. This is a coup. This is revolution. And it's all happening while the city dreams. By dawn, it's over. The coup has failed. Chavez is arrested, defeated. But then he does something no one expects. On national television, he looks into the camera with eyes that burn with something dangerous. Hora hora, he says. For now, we have failed. For now. Those two words electrified a nation. The revolution wasn't over. It was just beginning. And it would take 6 years before the real darkness descended. December 1998. Hugo Chavez wins the presidency in a landslide. The establishment is terrified. The United States is watching nervously, because Chavez isn't just another politician. He's a true believer, a revolutionary who sees himself as the heir to Simon Bolivar, the liberator, and he has a plan. He's going to use Venezuela's oil as a weapon. Not just against the rich, against the empire itself, against the United States of America. Chavez visits Fidel Castro in Cuba and calls him father. He makes alliances with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in Iran, with Vladimir Putin in Russia, with anyone willing to challenge American power. He buys billions in weapons. He creates Bolivarian Alliance, a coalition designed to break American dominance in Latin America. And every week on his TV show Allo Presidente, sometimes running 8 hours into the night, he mocks American presidents, reads revolutionary poetry, and warns of CIA assassins lurking in every shadow. He wasn't paranoid, not entirely. April 2002. The phone call comes at 3 a.m. Chavez is being arrested. The coup is happening, again, but this time it's working. Chavez is dragged from the presidential palace and flown to a military base. For 47 hours, Venezuela has a new president, businessman Pedro Carmona. The United States immediately recognizes the new government. Immediately. Before the sun even rises? Coincidence? Chavez didn't think so. But something unexpected happens. The poor millions of them pour into the streets. They surround the palace. They refuse to leave. The military wavers. Loyalist officers strike back. Within 60 hours, Chavez is back in power. He survived. But now he knew the truth. Washington wanted him dead. And the gloves were coming off. Oil. Always oil. Venezuela's blessing. Venezuela's curse. Chavez turned Venezuela's state oil company, PDVSA, into a revolutionary weapon. He fired the professionals, the engineers, the technical experts. He hired 100,000 new workers based on one qualification: loyalty to the revolution. He used oil money to fund free healthcare, free education, subsidized food. He sent cheap oil to Cuba. He gave billions to Bolivia, Nicaragua, Ecuador. And for a while, when oil prices were soaring over $100 a barrel, it worked. Venezuela was swimming in money. Chavez was a hero to the poor. His approval ratings touched 80%. But in the darkness, cracks were forming. The professionals who kept the oil flowing, gone, fled to Colombia, to the United States, to anywhere that would take them. Equipment started breaking. Fields were abandoned. Corruption metastasized like cancer. And still, the money poured out buying loyalty, buying weapons, buying influence across Latin America. The United States watched all of this happen. And despite everything, despite the rhetoric, despite the hatred, despite Chavez calling President Bush the devil at the United Nations, the oil kept flowing north. 1.5 million barrels every single day to American refineries. Both nations needed each other, and both nations knew it. It was a relationship built on mutual dependence and mutual contempt. A dance in the dark with knives hidden behind both backs. Then, March 5, 2013. Everything changes. Hugo Chavez dies. Cancer takes him at 58, and the man who inherits his revolution, Nicolas Maduro, a former bus driver with none of Chavez's charisma, none of his intelligence, is about to watch Venezuela descend into hell. Imagine your currency becoming worthless overnight. Not slowly, overnight. Imagine prices doubling every few days. Imagine going to the store and finding nothing: no food, no medicine, no diapers, no toilet paper. Imagine hospitals without anesthesia. Babies dying because there are no incubators. Imagine using stacks of cash as napkins because paper is cheaper than buying actual napkins. That's Venezuela under Maduro. That's the nightmare that descended after Chavez died. Oil prices collapsed. From $100 a barrel to $30. Venezuela's oil-dependent economy imploded. Inflation became hyperinflation 1,000,000%. 1 million. People started starving. Losing weight so rapidly they called it the Maduro diet. Venezuelans began fleeing, first thousands. Then hundreds of thousands. Then millions. They walked. Hundreds of miles, through Colombia, through Peru, through Chile. Families separated, children lost. Old people collapsing on roadsides. They walked at night to avoid the heat, to avoid the soldiers, to avoid the gangs that preyed on refugees like wolves on wounded deer. 7 million people. Nearly a quarter of the entire population, gone. The largest refugee crisis in the Western Hemisphere's history. All of it happening in the shadows while the world looked away. And the United States? They were about to make it worse. January 2017, Donald Trump enters the White House, and he has a plan for Venezuela. They call it maximum pressure, sanctions, not on individuals, on entire sectors. On the oil industry itself, the jugular of Venezuela's economy. The Trump administration cuts off Venezuela's ability to sell oil, to access international banks, to do business with anyone who doesn't want to face American penalties. It's economic warfare, designed to strangle, to suffocate. To force Maduro from power by making the Venezuelan people suffer so much they rise up and overthrow him themselves. But Maduro doesn't fall, and the people? They just suffer more. By 2020, Venezuelan oil production has collapsed from 3 million barrels a day to 500,000. The economy has shrunk by 75%. 75%. It's a collapse worse than the Great Depression, worse than the fall of the Soviet Union. And it's all happening in the dark, invisible to most of the world, ignored by most media. But something else is happening. Something dangerous. So where does it end? When does the sun rise? The truth is it doesn't. Not yet. Maduro remains in power, ruling over ruins. The sanctions remain in place, crushing what's left of Venezuela's economy. And millions of Venezuelans remain scattered across the continent, living in exile, wondering if they'll ever see home again. This is the war that came in shadows. A war without front lines, without heroic charges, without peace treaties. A war of sanctions and starvation, of refugees and ruins, of oil and ashes, and it's still being fought. Right now, tonight, while you're watching this. The United States couldn't remove Maduro despite being the world's superpower. Venezuela, with all its oil wealth, couldn't protect its own people, and the Venezuelan people? They're the ghosts of this conflict, the millions who lost everything, caught between an authoritarian government and an economic blockade that treats them as collateral damage. But here's what keeps me awake at night. Here's the question that should terrify you. In 2026, with global oil supplies unstable, with geopolitical tensions rising, with both nations more desperate than ever, what happens next? What happens when the powder keg finally explodes? Because this story isn't over. The war that came in shadows is still here, still waiting, still growing. The question isn't whether it will end. The question is how, and how many more will be swallowed by the darkness before dawn finally breaks. What do you think happens next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. And if this story shook you the way it shook me, hit that subscribe button. Because at Past X Proof, we go where others won't, into the shadows of history, into the stories that hide in the dark, into the night that never ends. Until next time, stay vigilant.